back, and I just left and got this morning. I went on a beautiful walk, and if you're where I'm at right now in Seattle, the Pacific Northwest, it is beautiful. It's very uncanny that it's like really sunny outside because it's usually gray and rainy. But I feel so refreshed. I'm back to just deliver another live stream. This one is called If You Understand the Mental Load Imbalance but still don't feel the relief, here's what to do instead. And I'm going to talk about one counterintuitive thing to do, and it's not going to be what you think it is. So if you're listening to this episode, you're probably past the point of wondering whether or not there's a pattern or imbalance. You kind of understand that there's a mental load imbalance going on in your household, and you already know that it didn't start with you. It started in your childhood. It doesn't mean that the mental load imbalance isn't an indication that your husband or partner doesn't care about the situation, doesn't work hard enough. In fact, you probably are in a situation where there's a lot of misunderstanding between you and your partner, and you probably both work really hard but are experiencing a lot of disconnect. And you're also probably, if you saw my last live stream, you probably noticed that the mental load imbalance didn't start with you. It started a long time ago with how your family history, your childhood, and how you were socialized. You were socialized and programmed and conditioned to be alert and hypervigilant, and you were programmed to walk into a room and just immediately have a list of things that you need to do according to what you observe. You've been deeply conditioned and trained to basically read the room and do what you needed to do accordingly. And that overfunctioning that we talked about in the past is very overprotective. It was very protective. It's a great adaptive and protective strategy. And still, even knowing this, like knowing that you're conditioned to be this way, won't calm your body down. And you tell yourself, I get it, I understand it. And the moment you try to rest or even delegate something or soften, that panic or guilt rushes in. And that's the space that we're talking about today. We're going to live in that space for a little bit. And most of the people at this stage have tried a lot. They've tried telling yourself that you don't need to do everything. You're like kind of being a minimalist and trying to minimize your expectations or commitments. Or you've tried reminding yourself that your partner is a very capable person and you intellectually understand your trauma history and your like family history. And you're probably in therapy right now. You've probably already tried going to therapy, I guess. That's another thing that people try. You've tried pushing yourself to let it go. You tell yourself, I just need to let it go and trust more. Another thing that you've probably tried is to explain your needs more clearly or tell your partner, like, this is exactly why I'm frustrated and this is what you need to do. And so what you're noticing is that nothing really sticks. Here's why. The reason is you're actually trying to change behavior without doing any of the internal work that's required to expand your nervous system in order to allow that behavior shift to stick. And without addressing the internal system that believes it's preventing disaster, your body isn't allowing your insight to stick. It's just ignoring your insight and awareness, and it's bypassing it, and it's responding to a deep default. So it's responding to what believes is an ongoing crisis. So when you try to relax, your system hears, oh my gosh, we're lowering our guard. When you try to delegate, it hears, oh my gosh, we're opening ourselves up to be more vulnerable to harm. And that's why awareness has not brought relief. Intellectual awareness about the mental load imbalance does not bring relief until you do the internal work to make space for it in your nervous system. And this is what we're actually dealing with, the internal system. When we are talking about the mental load and folks who are going into overfunctioning mode. It's what we call a manager heavy system. So it's like, if you are familiar with project management, if that's something that your job does, or event planning. Event planning is a great example of what's like a manager heavy system. Event planning, folks kind of have to think really far ahead and think about all the worst case scenarios that could happen when you're planning like a wedding, for example, and you are in proactive mode. And if you are an event planner for long enough, you know that sometimes you can find yourself stuck in that mental loop, even when you're off the clock, even when you're not in job mode. Like right before you go to sleep, you have these like experiences of being in your head about the to-do list, or in the middle of the night, sometimes you get jolted up by a shot of adrenaline that tells you to not forget something, or the first thing you wake up, there's like this surge of words that come alongside the to-do list that you need to do for the rest of the day. And what I'd like to compare this to, that stuckness, is it operates like an essential worker in a permanent emergency. And you remember how that was with COVID 5-6 years ago, during the beginning of COVID. Like essential workers were called out to hospitals or to wherever, and they were in this different mode. You had to kind of be in this mindset as an essential worker that you basically are risking your life out there. And this includes a manager inside your mind with a voice that tracks everything, anticipates risks, prevents mistakes, and stays emotionally braced. And it learned this job. It's like not something that you just fall into or grow it, like you just like all of a sudden have one day. You actually are slowly conditioned to be trained to be this way. And it comes from folks with a childhood where you had to grow up really fast, where no one was going to come rescue you, and mistakes had huge consequences that you had to deal with on your own. So of course, it doesn't trust in the goodness of rest. It doesn't trust in partnership because there was no one that came to get you. And also it resists shared ownership and partnership. Because from the manager's perspective, this internal voice that's inside that operates like an essential worker in a permanent crisis, softness feels like irresponsibility. It feels like denial. It feels like gaslighting of your lived experience. And I don't know if you remember back in 2020 or 2021, in the beginning of the COVID crisis, like whenever you were in a social gathering and you were not wearing a mask, it felt extremely, well, for me at least, it felt really anxiety provoking and really irresponsible to not wear a mask. I felt like deeply guilty if somebody else got my germs and they were sick or something. And I remember I could not relax during that time. I was on high alert. And this doesn't mean that your manager is wrong. This voice inside of you is wrong that causes you to overfunction in your mental load imbalance. It means that your manager doesn't know that the crisis is over. So I'm not here to say that COVID is over, because there's a lot of immunocompromised folks that really are still living the effects and the impacts of isolation because they are immunocompromised. But in general, for a lot of us without immunocompromised systems, we are living life without masks. We walk into the day-to-day functioning like it was before COVID. And to a lot of us, we got the memo, like COVID is over. It's like downgraded in its intensity. But a lot of us operate as if our childhood crises are not over yet. This is the cost of how it shows up in how you're coping right now. Because this essential worker that lives inside your brain believes everything is urgent. A few things start happening. You continue to overfunction with resentment instead of pride. You stay deeply engaged with your children, but you emotionally withdraw from your partner. And you avoid delegation, not because you don't want support, but because it feels unsafe or invalidating. And slowly the system shifts. There's less room for connection with your partner. There's less room for shared leadership. There's less room for co-regulation. And there's less room for rest. Not because you don't value those things, but because your system truly believes that if you rest, it will threaten a sense of safety that you have. And so what you actually want isn't to stop caring, right? Like, we don't want to stop caring about our family. We want relief without guilt. We want partnership without danger. And we want to rest without collapse. To stop feeling like we're the only line of defense. You want your body to believe what your mind already knows. And that's the real desire. You want your body to believe that the crisis is over and it can truly rest. So this is the part that often surprises people in how I present how to work with the mental load and how we as mental load owners overfunction. The way out of the mental load imbalance is partially not to override this essential worker in your brain, but it's to update the essential worker in your brain. And we're trying to, if we try to shut down that voice inside of us that tells us to overfunction, and as if it's operating in a permanent crisis, it will always fail because it believes it's keeping your children alive. And instead, the work is to approach this voice that kind of believes that it's a permanent crisis with curiosity and a lot of compassion. To say to yourself, to this voice, I see how hard you're working. I understand why you don't trust your partnership. And I'm not asking you to go away. And then critically, compassionately, turn towards what you're guessing the manager, that essential worker, might be protecting. Beneath the hypervigilance that essential worker has is usually a tender, vulnerable feeling that they're protecting you from. A tender, vulnerable part of you that learned that safety was conditional and not guaranteed. That a part that felt really deeply alone during a period of instability, and the part that never got to rest. So my guess is, if you are a mental load owner like me, that you probably had to grow up really fast, that you probably learned that no one was coming to rescue you, that you had to figure it out on your own, that safety was conditional and really not guaranteed, that you probably lived in deep instability, even though your life on the outside looked really put together. And so that is the force sometimes that causes us to overfunction, and that force contributes to the mental load imbalance. And this is not to blame mental load owners to say, oh, we are the problem. But what I'm saying and I'm inviting you to do is to consider that there is something inside of us that drives us to overfunction, even if it's against our interest or desires. And that part of us that overfunctions can't really soften until they're met with love and curiosity and really inner child reparenting. This reparenting, we're thinking like, oh, I'm a parent to my physical children who are 11, 8, and 4 years old. But what I want to invite you to consider is that you have children inside of you that are younger versions of you that have not gotten that support that they needed. And actually they're like in some ways acting out right now in order to get your attention. And part of that work is to look inward and to notice, okay, what parts of me require my attention? What parts of me require the same kind of loving parenting that I'm offering my kids? And that's why just letting it go does not work, because we're not really doing behavior change stuff. We're doing that internal work that requires the energy shift. So what does that mean practically speaking? It means that your job right now is not to delegate more or lower your standards or to force yourself to trust your partner more. That's not what I'm asking you to do. Your job right now is to notice when that panic or guilt arises, recognize that voice that brings that panic and guilt as an essential worker inside your heart or brain that believes that it's in a permanent crisis, and not believe it as truth. Pause before you act on it and gently ask yourself, what are you afraid of if you didn't overfunction? And that pause before that action is the beginning of self-awareness, or it's a continuation of your self-awareness. It's not over controlling, it's not collapsing, it's self-leadership. So if you want real change going forward and not just intellectual insight that will give you the light bulb moment or aha moments, which for me as a therapist, I do not think that it's worth chasing the light bulb moments, by the way. You need to consider this. Your system does not need more discipline. It needs co-regulation. Your manager inside of you that believes that you're in an essential, that believes it's an essential worker inside a permanent crisis does not need silencing. It needs updating. Your exhaustion isn't proof that you're doing it wrong. It is proof that you've been carrying too much alone for too long. And safety does not come from you alone, but your system won't believe that until it experiences something different. And now, if you're in the place of saying, I know why I overfunction, but I still don't know how to stop, that doesn't mean that you're stuck. It just means that you're standing on the fence between understanding and transformation. And that next step is not doing less. It's just leading your system differently. So it starts by befriending the parts of you that never got the memo that the crisis has changed. So I hope that that was helpful. I'm going to record this and put it on my my what you would call it, that thing, that grid, and also post it to my podcast so you could re-listen to it. And I'm happy to answer any questions, or feel free to leave your questions in the comments, and I look forward to the next live stream where we could have more of these times. Thank you so much for joining. Bye.